Welcome to the Going Green podcast, and today we're going to have a look at fracking. Is it good or is it bad? Well, I'm going to say something before I even start, is that I'm not a great fan of fracking. So I'm going to lay my cards on the table and say, well, since I sponsor Going Green, I think it's probably right that you'd expect that I'm actually going to be against fracking. But anyway, what is fracking? And fracking is actually a short-term use of the proper word, which is hydraulic fracturing. And I suppose people can't say that, so they say fracking instead. And it's a technique for recovering gas and oil from shale rock. Now, shale rock is just basically a rock that can absorb or has absorbed oil and gas long time ago, and above that rock typically is a much harder sort of not gas permeable but impenetrable rock.
Yeah, I was going to say denser, but that's the wrong word. But it is that, it is a gas impermeable.
Yeah,
I think it's the actual more answer than the actual gas permeable.
A lot of places it's actually made some stuff called mudstone, which is sort of, well, from what it says, but it is an incredibly hard and basically impermeable rock. So we have at the top layer, we've got sort of all sorts of rocks. Then somewhere down below, we've got this impermeable layer. And below that, we've got some rocks that have basically absorbed oil and gas over the last few sort of million years.
But it's not they have absorbed it. That's what I was reading isn't quite the way it's sort of. It's more the sort of the rock has formed instead of, say, it forming coal. Yeah, as in it's just one of those things
which is where you've just got the organic stuff.
Yeah, it's more there. It formed, the oil has formed already, and some of the rock has formed differently, and it just hasn't managed to form effectively coal. If that makes sense.
It's seeped into this, and you've got some sort of, if you can put down really hot water sometimes, that will sort of release the oil from the rock, and we know that oil floats on water, so it basically floats to the top, except it floats to the top under high pressure. So what they do is they drill a hole, they go through this mudstone, this really hard impermeable rock, and there they find a pocket of gas, and that pocket of gas, then natural gas, can supply the UK with all its gas needs forever and a day. And oh no, sorry, I'm reading the wrong script.
Yeah, now you are. Right, yeah, the answer is, so they pump all this, basically, it's a mixture of water, sand, and chemicals down into the shale to basically to smash it to bits in the hopes that basically it will release all its oil and gas and it bubbles up back through the pipe, obviously where they've just, where they've done this borehole, and it comes out.
And of course, this does cause seismic events. Now, well, let's be fair, most of the seismic events are actually quite small, and they're sort of 1.5 on the Richter scale, which is really sort of not much more than a lorry going down by a road, really.
Yeah, they were talking about sort of, humans, can feel the earth shifting at about a Richter scale of 2. That's when we start to feel it. And so anything below that, we can't feel. We can detect it, we just can't feel it personally.
Yeah, so I've got an app on my phone and I can just lay it on the ground and it will record seismic events, like me walking across the floor, like the lorry going down the road. And I can record those, but yeah, they're very small. But if you want anything bigger, then it's a concern. Now, are seismic events concerns to people? Of course they are. But in fact, if they don't do any fracking, the UK does get quite a few seismic events of its own anyway.
Yeah, the answer is does the fracking cause more of them? The answer is yes. That's a,
Yeah,
sort of the
absolutely.
simplest thing. So it's not that they don't happen; is that we receive them. Now, let's go a bit further back in time, because of course, well, more forward in time, because obviously fracking was developed in the I say 1960s, but I think it was before that. Anyway, they were trying to find new sources of oil and gas,
And this was often in America,
and this
wasn't
was
it?
all done in America, where they were having lots of oil wells, and they're basically doing all sorts of things. Anyway, so back in 2008, the there was a proposal to do some exploratory to see if the shale we had in the UK was like the same shale America has, in which case then obviously the technology is the same, and the fracking industry in America can be with help brought over to the UK,
Because we don't have any, do
we
we?
don't have any. This is the whole one of the crux of the problem. So that was the plan. And so in 2008 they started exploratory wells. I say exploratory drills and all sorts of things. And since 2010, when the coalition came out, they're sort of starting government money into helping these things and trying to get them going. And then in 2016, there was a massive problem in Cumbria. I think it's Cumbria. It might be Cal, which is the name of the oil site, where there was this huge, I say huge,
Cuadrilla.
Cuadrilla, that was it. There you go.
In Lancashire,
In
actually.
Lancashire. So I knew it was something.
You were close. You were close, yeah.
Anyway, where basically I say a seismic event was detected, but it was quite a large seismic event in relation to the area of the seismic. It wasn't sort of like a little bit. It was the whole shale platform sort of slid. Yeah, it's on a fault. That's how it. And basically, this earthquake happened, and people were worried, and so drilling stopped in 2016, and basically they were told not to do any more drilling whilst it was surveyed and see if any prevention to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So then in 2019, Boris Johnson's new government imposed a moratorium on shale gas exploration, saying no more. Absolute zero, no more. Because of course it's one of those things where the British Geological Survey said, not more research needs to be done, but it was the fact that sort of we can't predict when things are going to happen. It was just not safe. That's the wrong way to put. They didn't say it wasn't safe. That wasn't what they're saying. It was unpredictable, and they said that's the nature of shale or fracking. It was sort of this unpredictable nature of what could happen to the environment in relation to all these things. So it was basically put off because, of course, at that time we were having Russian gas was cheap, everything was fine and dandy, and so that's why it was sort of like, well, we don't need this. We've got imports from Russia, and they're happy.
Yeah. But we have to say that in 2019, this site in Lancashire, there were more than 120 tremors recorded. All right, a lot of them were too small to be felt, but some of them were over 1.5, and they were able to be, sort of detected. So, yeah, okay. So let's see if we can put some facts into sort of some of these sort of things, I suppose. Right. So this fracking, a lot of it's done in America. Now, let's translate that into Britain. Okay, now Britain, we're a bit different type of country than the USA, and I don't mean sort of politically or anything else. I mean geologically.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a lot of faults. Now, if we've got a lot of faults in the rock, then this impermeable rock is already cracked, And a lot of the gas that's in there has probably escaped over the last few, well,
I wouldn't say million years, but it's in
it
that
it
sort
could it could even
in
be that sort of
geological
time.
terms, it's a very short period.
Very short time, yes.
However,
So there probably isn't very much gas. You know, in fairness, we're not going to see an awful lot of gas really there. Now, what can we say about this sort of gas and what we know about things at the moment? So in the UK, we can only meet about 48% of our gas demand from domestic supplies.
correct.
And it would be 54% if we didn't actually export any, but we do actually export some. But we're still in need of, if we're using 50% of our gas in this country for electric and other supplies, then we can only naturally, this country can get about 48% of that. And so the rest of it we've got to import. And so there's this idea that if we started drilling somewhere, we could get a little bit more gas.
And the important thing, of course, there means that we have, if we're getting domestic supply up of gas, that means, of course, we spend less on imports.
Yeah.
Now, there is a crucial thing around all of this. If we're having domestic supply of gas made, I say extracted, that, of course, means less imports, which, of course, then means less emissions caused by imports.
Yeah, because they're coming by ship, aren't they?
Yeah.
Mostly now.
Yeah. Which actually means a reduction of CO2 emissions. Now, this is not, gas burning, but you're then paying for the pipelines in the UK and not having to pay for the import of a ship, which of course very emission heavy. And so suddenly you go from a high emission industry and make it lower emission, even though it causes emissions, which is, it's one of those odd sort of things. But it seems as that's the transition from, heavy relying on imports to domestic supply, and that will help the government's goal of a net, I think net zero, or by this legally bound target by 2050. So that's the eye in the sky sort of
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah. So I think there's probably not much gas, and it's not just me that thinks this. The total amount of gas produced in Lancashire, which I think was about in 2019, was enough to provide the heating and water for 508 three-bedroom semi-detached houses for a massive 18 days.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's basically not much gas to show after spending, it was 8 years and tens of millions of pounds. It costs way, way too much to produce the little gas that they actually managed to extract.
Well, this is the whole crux of one of the things. We've got this, we know the geological, I was going to say geological map of the UK. We know what the ground is made up from, and we know where these pockets of shale are.
Well, we don't really.
Well,
we got some idea, but the exact extent of those, we actually have to do lots and lots more drills to try and find out. They've done a few drill boreholes and they found some, and they then predict from knowing what the rocks are like that we would expect it to find in this area. But of course, they don't know.
And the other thing about that is, of course, from America, let's say a shale rock of a meter cubed contains, I don't know, like 3 meters cubed of oil. Okay, it's just one of these. Okay, just one of these random numbers, as I said. Right. However, what they're finding here in the UK is that the same volume of rock or shale contains, of course, 15% less than the rock in America, which is not surprising because, of course, we've got two different types of geologies,
and our rocks are a lot older than America.
Yeah, and so one of the important things about all that is the fact that sort of, let's say a company in America says, right, we can extract, 15 tons out, or let's say 20, when they come to England, they say, right, same rock, looks the same place, but we're only extracting sort of 2. And sort of say, well, hang on, you promised us 20 because that's how it works, right?
Different rock.
Exactly.
Right. So you can do a little test borehole. You can try it out, find out what you've got there. And if you're lucky, you get some stuff out. It gives it for a little while, and then you decide you need to abandon it. And that's going to then cost millions of pounds to clean it all up and make sure that basically, you're not going to get any later subsidence going on. And I know what this is like because when I was working in Watford, there's a little housing estate next to where I was working. And one day there wasn't, as it started sinking because of various sort of
It was a geological fault in it.
geological fault. Yes.
Completely natural. It's just something where something has shifted and it suddenly.
Yeah.
Wasn't it daft? It was like a foot lower than the rounding. It was something.
It didn't move much, yeah. But a foot in some parts of your house and a foot in other parts of the house did cause them to sort of be demolished.
Yes.
So there are problems with even little movements with faults. We don't have that many here. We don't have lots of mines really in this country, and then they build on top of it and then they subside. We don't get that. But it does cause some problems, and we have to be aware of those problems. So basically, we're thinking that there probably isn't that much gas, because like it or not, the UK isn't the USA. It's a different country. It's got different rock, and we haven't found lots of really good shale for onshore gas production. We know there's not that much gas because when they've had a go at trying to find it, they haven't found as much as has been sort of predicted. There are theoretical estimates saying, oh, yes, it's going to be this much. And then when we start having a look, it's 15 times less.
I know. It's one of those things where it's a bit ridiculous in relation to all that. But one of the major crux of all this, let's say, since the Liz Truss's new government lifted the moratorium, in approximately for us, maybe sort of on to 2 weeks ago. It's sort of like something done for like 12 days. Well, since whenever they came in. But effectively, let's say the oil or the shale and the fracking industry gets going from that date, right? The estimated initial volume of gas that was going to be extracted for market was expected to be given to the market by approximately August of next year. Which, of course, is an important note that it isn't in winter. And so we're going into this fuel crisis this winter. And so the plan to do this referendum, getting all this shale gas out to help domestic supply of gas, so we've got enough gas for heating and those sorts of things, of course, won't be for this winter.
It'll be for next.
It'll be for next. Now, that's not necessarily a problem in relation to, we're trying to decrease gas dependency, and we're trying to sort of up domestic supply and all those sorts of things in the medium term. And so fracking isn't the short-term solution that everybody claims it to be. It is this sort of prolonged, and then hopefully gives enough to show or to save, not our bacon, that's the wrong way to put it, but sort of is to push and sort of decrease our dependence on imports.
Yeah. But, how much in the way of reserves have we got? And the answer is, well, there's all these theoretical numbers, but we actually don't know how much. So this could be a problem. And the other one is that when you actually drill a borehole down and you fracture the rock, it doesn't always fracture where you expect it to fracture. And you get lots of other fractures. And when they tried this in Lancashire, we noticed that quite a lot of methane gas got released into the atmosphere, not through the sort of borehole. They were quite good. No, in other places. And that's because, you know, fracturing rock is not a very exact science.
No.
You fracture the rock and you hope it's going to fracture here, and it might, but if you're going to get an earthquake, then you're getting fracturing occurring all over the place in a rather small area, I will admit. But then it could cause the gas to leak, so that's a problem.
And that's the gas we want to capture, of course.
Yeah.
For the fuel. So yeah, it's one of those things where, as I said, the science of fracture or fracking not is exact, but it's one of those things where they understand the drilling part and the hydraulic part, but it's also you can't just put a massive balloon over the whole area, to capture it, which just is daft.
Yeah.
So that's the whole. Yeah, that's why they want to extract it via the pipe, which is collect it in the water and find it come back.
Is there any other bad things about fracking that we ought to know? One of the things that I know is that the proponents of this fracking, certain MPs, they actually have shares in some of these fracking companies.
Well, yes. Well, it's one of those things where our new business secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, he's the one who introduced this, or I say cancelled. He's the one who introduced legislation that cancelled the moratorium on the fracking. And of course, it's one of those odd things where, he's got business interests in, I say, a few things, and he's actually got business interests in a company that has business interests in one of these fracking companies. As I said, it's a bit sort of 13 points of whatever. So he's not directly related, but of course,
he could be strongly persuaded.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's one of those things where is it seen as trying to lift this moratorium as a sense of business relation for him, or is it good for the country? Now, it's hard to say which, but we can say that we can look at it and say, well, this is what has happened, and excuse me. So anything that is happening is more sort of got to look at. You got to hold them to account. Is he doing this for his own sake, or is he doing this for king and country now?
Yeah, but it might not just be him. He probably got quite a few friends in the sort of the government who are also beneficiaries of this.
And one of the major, I say, beneficiaries of this is, of course, the UK economy. So the experts of the fracking industry, I say experts, have said, of course, this was introduced approximately something like 74,000 new jobs into the UK.
Yeah, I like the sound of that, but hang on a minute. I'm just thinking that we're running out of energy. We're running out of gas. Okay, so this is going to provide us more gas, but it's going to be very expensive to actually extract. That's actually going to put the cost of gas up.
Oh, yes.
Whereas if we could spend that same money on wind turbines, then that might be, we'd probably get a lot more wind turbines and last a lot longer.
A better option,
and that is one of the things that they've done in this country. We're going to be seeing more wind turbines, and people generally are quite in favour of wind turbines as long as they're not nearby to them.
Well, this is one of the things.
And I think the same goes with fracking, doesn't it?
Yeah, the answer is people like the idea of fracking in relation is, will it reduce the cost of gas currently? And the answer is eventually it could. I say could because obviously it depends on how much gas they get out.
I think it's a definite maybe, isn't it?
Correct. Definite maybe is the point. And so that's the purpose of doing that. And sort of, and yes, it can provide lots of jobs. But of course, one of the major things, of course, is the UK isn't sort of a big mining or drilling country. So that, of course, that means we're going to get training from elsewhere. Now,
or buy bringing in all the experts, and that's going to cost more money. And that's not going to British jobs then, is it? It's going to other countries.
Yeah, so it's one of those awkward things where, they say all these things, but it's not quite, you know. And the local areas, sort of course, people don't like having these earthquakes.
Yeah.
And
Well, generally, I think a lot of people are very anti-fracking. Quite a lot of people are anti-fracking because they don't know what fracking is, though, to be quite honest.
yes, there's been quite a lot of thought. So just,
Oh, no, we mustn't do this because, and they're talking out of their, yeah. But we've got experts going along talking about fracking and what fracking is and what it does and what you can actually produce by it. And if these experts sort of say things are bad, then I'd like to believe them. Yeah, it is feasible to get quite a lot of gas and perhaps even some oil out of this, but we're not thinking of the UK becoming another Texas, are we?
no. The answer is the fracking industry would like to become the new Texas. It's not quite worth it in relation to that. And they're saying that if the government don't put money into the industry, it's not economic viable. Now, it's one of those awkward things where sort of it's the investment required, but at the same time, companies are trying to go green. Is it going to go for more gas? And the answer is possibly not. They've seen the public outcry trying to also, decarbonize, and here's the last hurrah for carbon, and the answer is we're not trying to get there. So it's one of the things where,
But the government is.
well, the government,
Ish.
yeah, the answer is it's they've got to hit this target by 2050 of net zero. Now, is that meaning trying to reduce our emissions? The answer is a little bit yes, but unfortunately, a lot of it is more let's just offset it, which is that a different problem. And so, it's challenging to actually say we need to be net zero and reduce our emissions, but this current policy or current strategy is more about increasing our emissions. Therefore, we've got more offsetting to do, which of course isn't great. But, and we've proven that previous episodes of this podcast. We've said and stated reason all the sort of these things, but it's one of those things where it is seen as shale has been natural gas as a sort of transition from coal, which is because of course natural gas burns cleaner than other fossil fuels, which is better, and so you could use that to transition from dirty coal to clean wind. And currently we're sitting in the middle where we don't know quite where in the transition we exist. So
Yeah, my opinion, for what it's worth, is fracking probably just isn't really worth the expense for what we're going to get out. We don't know how much gas there is there to get out. It's just guesses, really. And my guesses is probably as good as anybody else's because there are only these estimates of what there is going to be rather than, what there really is, not until we do a lot more research. And why not spend that money on solar, wind, wave, tidal, which are all technologies that could work.
exactly, and this is the whole crux of the strategy. Is we understand that the government needs to lower gas costs, and make more domestic supply of gas available.
But is this the way to do it?
But is this the way to do it? That's exactly the right question, or even more precisely, the question of to be put to the government, sort of, is this the best way? Because we believe that it really isn't.
You've been watching and listening to the Going Green podcast, looking at fracking. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another topic on going green. Until then, it's goodbye from me and
A goodbye from me.
goodbye.
Bye.